True crime streaming giants like Netflix have built a reputation on peeling back the darkest layers of human behavior, but some cases remain too horrific for mainstream platforms. These 5 true crime stories cross lines of depravity, torture, and unsolved mystery that even the most daring producers refuse to touch. The first case begins in a remote desert compound in New Mexico, where a man named David Parker Ray constructed a custom-made torture chamber he called his playhouse. David Parker Ray, known as the Toy Box Killer, operated with his girlfriend Cindy Hendy and sometimes his daughter, preying on women he abducted from highways and bars. His transportation method was a modified van with a hidden compartment, and he would drug his victims with animal tranquilizers to render them helpless. Once inside the playhouse, victims were strapped to a gynecological table, subjected to days of psychological and physical torture, and forced to listen to a chilling audio recording that outlined their fate. That recording, which police later recovered, began with Ray saying in a calm voice, "You have been captured and are now a prisoner," setting the tone for systematic abuse. The toy box was equipped with tools like whips, chains, electrical devices, and a full medical kit, because Ray had been a volunteer firefighter and had medical training. He boasted that his methods were drawn from CIA interrogation manuals and Nazi experiments, claiming he wanted to break his victims' will completely. Ray never killed his victims directly, he would dump them alive but traumatized on remote roads, believing the system would dismiss them as unreliable witnesses. Estimates suggest Ray tortured over 60 women between the 1950s and 1999, but he was only convicted for 1 murder due to lack of bodies. The case is too dark for Netflix because Ray's audio recording of systematic torture is so explicit and disturbing that editors fear normalizing extreme sadism. One survivor, Cynthia Vigil, described waking up in the playhouse and hearing Ray's voice on the tape, her terror so profound that she attempted suicide multiple times after escape. Unique fact, Ray designed the playhouse with soundproofing, a video intercom, and an escape-proof cell, yet he kept detailed journals of his fantasies that police used as evidence. He died in prison in 2002 from a heart attack, but his daughter Glenda Ray claimed he had passed the family business to her before his arrest. The Toy Box Killer case remains a cautionary tale about the limits of true crime entertainment, where some acts of cruelty are too visceral for binge-watching. The second case transports us to rural Bavaria in 1922, where the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most unsettling unsolved crimes. On March 31, 1922, the entire Gruber family, 5 people including a 2-year-old girl and a teenage maid, were bludgeoned to death with a mattock on their isolated farm. The killer lived on the property for at least 3 days after the murders, feeding the livestock and cooking meals in the kitchen, as evidenced by cold coffee and half-eaten bread. Neighbors had reported seeing strange footprints in the snow leading to the farmhouse but none leading away, suggesting murderer never left. The victims were found in the barn, stacked on top of each other, their heads crushed, but the maid was discovered separately in her bedroom with the blood from her wounds seemingly wiped away. Unique fact, the family had claimed to hear footsteps in the attic for days before the attack, and father had said, "I don't think we're alone in this house." Police found a newspaper in the farmhouse dated the day after the murders, indicating the killer stayed to read, and the stove was still warm 3 days later. No motive was ever determined, robbery was unlikely because money was still in the house, and the family had no known enemies. The case has inspired supernatural theories because locals reported ghostly apparitions and the farm was later burned down to exorcise the evil. One of the most debated details is the cause of a large bruise on the daughter's face, which may have been from a blow or a struggle before death. DNA analysis in the 2000s failed to identify the killer, leaving the case officially open but effectively cold. Hinterkaifeck is too dark for Netflix because the killer's prolonged presence after death creates a sense of intimate evil that feels like a horror film, but it's real. The third case involves Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, the Ken and Barbie killers, of Ontario, Canada, whose crimes are so vile they were sealed from public records for decades. The couple abducted, raped, murdered, and dismembered 3 teenage girls, including Carla's own sister, between 1990 and 1992. Carla Homolka lured her own sister, Tammy Lynn, to their home on December 23, 1990, drugged her with halothane stolen from her veterinary clinic, and then watched as Bernardo sexually assaulted the unconscious 15-year-old. Tammy died from asphyxiation when her airway filled with vomit, and the couple staged her death as an accident, with Carla pretending to be devastated at the funeral. They later recorded their atrocities on videotape, capturing every moment of torture and murder for their own enjoyment. The couple's reign ended when Bernardo was convicted of multiple counts, but Carla made a controversial plea deal. She received 12 years for testifying against him, despite being an active participant. Unique fact: Carla's diary revealed she wrote about her lust for violence and control, describing Bernardo as her master and herself as his slave. Their videotapes, which police dubbed the home movies, were so graphic that viewing was restricted to only essential investigators, and they were ordered destroyed in 1995. The case sparked a national outrage over Canada's plea bargain system, with many believing Carla manipulated the justice system using her gender and appearance. Today, Carla Homolka lives free in Quebec, having changed her name, married a man, and raised children, while Paul Bernardo remains in prison and continues to sue for conjugal visits. This case is too dark for Netflix because the normalization of torture on tape, combined with Carla's relative freedom, feels like a betrayal of justice that streaming services fear to address. The fourth case takes us to California's Plumas National Forest in 1978, where the Yuba County Five vanished into thin air, only to be discovered dead under bizarre circumstances. The five men, Ted Whiter, Jack Hewitt, Gary Mathias, Bill Sterling, and Bob Mathias, were all in their 20s and mentally disabled, with Gary being the only one with schizophrenia. They left after attending a basketball game and were last seen on a remote forest road, their car abandoned with a flat tire that was never repaired. 8 weeks later, search teams found their bodies in a combination of locations, some in the car, others at a nearby campground, and one, Ted Whiter, in a trailer that was stocked with food and supplies he apparently never touched. Ted Whiter's body was found in a sleeping bag, covered by a blanket, and he had starved to death even though the trailer was full of canned food, matches, and a heater. His death was ruled hypothermia and starvation, but the autopsy revealed he had not eaten in weeks and had not attempted to use a working stove. The other men's bodies were found at different distances, with no signs of violence or struggle, and their shoes and clothes were oddly missing. Unique fact: the men were discovered only after a newspaper published a photo of the missing car, but a woman had reported seeing the car a month earlier and was ignored. Gary Mathias, the only one with a driver's license, was found in a beam of sunlight, his position suggesting he had been looking up, and his body showed no signs of the schizophrenia medication he supposedly needed. Theories range from accidental hypothermia to a survival experiment gone wrong, but the lack of forced entry or motive leaves the case open. An FBI analysis in 2001 suggested possible suicidal pact, but family members insist the men were too close-knit to leave each other to die. The Yuba County Five case is too dark for Netflix because the men's cognitive disabilities and the mystery of a trailer full of food but no eating hit on themes of isolation and neglect that are uncomfortable for mass audiences. The fifth and final case involves Amy Lynn Bradley, a 23-year-old woman who vanished from a Royal Caribbean cruise ship in 1998, and whose alleged sightings suggest a human trafficking nightmare. The cruise was traveling from Aruba to Curacao when Amy disappeared from her cabin after partying at the ship's nightclub. Her family was initially told she had jumped overboard, but no suicide note or motive existed, and Amy was a fit, happy woman with a bright future. Unique fact: her father, Ron Bradley, claimed he smelled cigarette smoke from an unknown person in her cabin the morning after she vanished, and a towel was missing. Over the years, multiple credible sightings emerged, including one by a former U.S. Army Ranger who said he saw Amy being sold as a prostitute in a Curacao brothel in 1999. The Ranger, named Bobby, took a photo that he believed showed Amy with a large tattoo on her back, a tattoo police later confirmed matched a description Amy had of a never-before-seen ink. Another sighting came from a couple on a sailboat near Barbados who saw a young woman calling out for help from a small motorboat, only to be silenced by a man. The FBI investigated these leads, but the cruise line refused to cooperate fully, and the case remains open with no charges. Amy's blood was found in her cabin, not from suicide, but from a possible struggle, and her parents believe she was trafficked by the ship's crew. Cruise ship security footage was erased before investigators could review it, and a crew member named Paul from Latvia was a person of interest but never arrested. Data from the U.S. State Department shows that cruise ship disappearances are underreported, with over 300 people vanishing from these vessels since 1995, many assumed to be victims of crime. Amy's case is too dark for Netflix because it implicates a multi-billion-dollar industry and exposes the ease with which a young woman can be abducted in international waters. The lack of accountability and the family's futile decades-long search hit too close to home for viewers who trust vacation getaways. Conclusion: these 5 cases share a common thread. They are not just about murder, but about the unspeakable depravity that society struggles to process. The Toy Box Killer shows how torture can be systematized, Hinterkaifeck shows how evil can linger, Ken and Barbie show how beauty can mask horror. The Yuba County 5 question our understanding of survival, and Amy Bradley exposes the dark underbelly of global tourism. Netflix may bypass these stories because they force viewers to confront the possibility that some monsters never face justice, and some mysteries never close. But that is exactly why they must be told, to honor the victims, to challenge our limits, and to remind us that the darkest corners of true crime are not for passive consumption. As one former investigator for the Bradley family said, the truth is out there, but it's buried under layers of denial and profit, and it's up to all of us to dig.